You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.
Don't you dare touch that dial or channel because it's Sunday at 7 p.m. on iHeart's WRKO, and you're listening to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. Hey, everybody. Well, it's been a busy week. Last week, we talked about the 3 options that President Trump had as it relates to Iran. And we ended up, even though President Trump said he was going to give Iran 2 weeks to consider it, that was a distraction. That was camouflage, because within 30 hours after Trump said he was going to give him 2 weeks and had him distracted, he dropped bombs on Iran's 3 nuclear sites. 2 B-1 and B-2 bombers left Kansas, flew for 36 hours, not landing one time, refueling in the air several times, gets over Iran and drops those bunker buster bombs that we talked about that penetrate the ground 200 feet, have a delayed fuse, and then explode. And the preliminary reports from President Trump and the White House is that it was a complete success. In President Trump's words, the Iran's nuclear plans and facilities were obliterated. Now, there's been some inconsistencies and some CNN reporting and others saying that, oh, no, they didn't obliterate it. They've only delayed it by a few months. So we don't have the final report, but we must acknowledge the amazing feat of American pilots, the American military. God bless those pilots. God bless the crew. It was a flawless operation. You know, whether it completely destroyed the nuclear facilities that are underground or it didn't, we don't know. You got to remember also those bunker buster bombs have never really been tested in combat. So we don't know if they, implemented and executed the way that they're designed. But needless to say, it was a big moment for the military, for the Trump presidency. Last week, I said that this would be possibly the single biggest decision of the presidency of Donald Trump in his second term, his final term. And, he chose what he did. It right now looks like it was the right call. And I always told you, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. We all agree that Iran can't have a nuclear bomb. Last week, I questioned the intelligence because there seemed to be some inconsistency. Did they have a bomb? Were they close to nuclear weapons? How close were they to nuclear weapons? I played that videotape of Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been saying that they're close since 2006. Every year he says they're close. Obviously, I don't know how close they are, but President Trump felt they were close enough, or he simply felt that the opportunity was there to at least set back their nuclear aspirations, whether it's months or years or decades, we don't know, while Iran was so weakened. A lot of people feared Iran's response would attack American bases, American lives would be lost, and then President Trump would be forced to even engage Iran further. That was the fear. And what happened was extraordinary. Iran basically wanted to make a symbolic hit back to the United States. But what they did is basically picked up the phone, called President Trump in the White House and said, listen, we're going, get your people out. We're going to send, the same amount of bombs. We're going to send the same amount of missiles that you dropped. And, your air defense systems will be able to knock them out. And what ended up happening, I think they sent 13 missiles. 12 of them were shot out of the air by American Patriot missiles. And they allowed one to land because it wasn't going to cause any problem. But that's an extraordinary thing when Iran says, hey, we're going to respond to you dropping bombs on us, but here's the time and the place and the coordinates so that you can, defend yourself. Obviously, Iran did not want to take a chance with President Trump. And so that's an extraordinary thing. And we have to give President Trump credit because immediately then he negotiated a ceasefire. And that ceasefire, he got pissed off, very angry, because there was an inadvertent missile from Iran. And then as Trump went to bed, Israel bombed a lot of Iran in response when it's supposed to be a ceasefire. So some of you probably heard the Trump tape where he dropped the F-bomb, said that both sides have been at war so long they don't know what the F they're doing. So, but right now it looks like there is peace. And if President Trump negotiates a peace deal with Iran, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and he's able to negotiate or help negotiate a deal between Ukraine and Russia, it will go down monumental. And the critics aren't going to want to give him credit. But on this show, it's called The Hard Truth, and we're always going to give credit where credit is due. Where credit is due. So we'll see. Okay. Now, the other big news that happened this week, other than the Iran situation, was the election of the primary in New York City for the mayor race. Zohran Mamdani, a Democratic socialist and New York State Assembly member from Queens, won the Democratic primary for mayor of New York City over Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York. He is the first Muslim, or at least will be the first Muslim mayor of New York City. Again, he's a Democratic socialist, okay? And I'll talk about some of his policies here and why I believe he won. He got big endorsements from AOC, Letitia James. He has now been congratulated by former President Bill Clinton, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Ed Markey. They're all coming out saying, what a great guy this Democratic socialist is. And he's also said a lot of anti-Israel comments. So he's very controversial. You have to give him credit because he ran against the mainstream. He was able to create a grassroots campaign, really a TikTok campaign with young people. He captured the attention of South Asian and Muslims in New York City. There's 500,000 Muslims that live in New York City, and his policies are resonated with people. And, what he wanted to do is he says he's going to increase the minimum wage in New York City to $30 an hour by 2030. He is said he's going to implement New York City-owned grocery stores that will be able to give more affordable prices for people for groceries in New York City. The bus rides will be free. He will implement rent control in New York City. As you can see, very progressive, socialistic type policies that are quite controversial. And a lot of people are shocked that this guy, engaging in those policies was elected. And I'm not shocked. I'm not surprised. And I think we're going to see more of this. Listen, I said when I ran against Elizabeth Warren, she was claiming that the number one issue was climate change. And I said, no, climate change is real and it's a concern, but it's not the most immediate concern. Grocery prices, housing prices, housing crisis, a lack of affordability for people living day to day is the real problem. I said the number one problem in America is a wealth gap. The top 1% in this country own 33% of all the wealth. The bottom 50% own 2%. So think about that. Top 1% owns almost 40%. Bottom 50% owns 2%. That's incredible. And the wealth gap gets worse and worse. We've eviscerated the middle class. Housing prices in Massachusetts average is $650,000. The greater Boston area, it's over $1 million. People can't afford to live. And we've got to address it. Credit card debt is at $1.2 trillion. Student loan debt's at $1.8 trillion. People cannot afford to live. And when we shut down the government and gave them $600 from the federal government plus their unemployment benefits, they were making more money. Do you realize that 20% of the people made twice as much as they did before COVID when they were working full time? 66% of the people made 140% more than they did when they were working full time. And now prices are so high and they got to work their butts off. They got to have two jobs just to keep the lights on. People are going to turn to politicians who promise them that they're going to have cheaper groceries, that they're going to have rent control, that they're going to have free bus rides. They're going to turn to those socialistic principles. We've got to take issue with the wealth gap in this country. The tax code favors the rich. We've bailed out the banks. We bailed out the auto workers, the airlines, the railroads. It's time to worry about Main Street and regular people. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Listen, we are at a period in the show where I read an email that I received from one of the viewers. Sometimes I do one of these emails. Sometimes I do more emails in each show. But this one caught my attention. And I'm going to read it to you, okay? And here's the email. Dear John, and this happens to be from Brian in Seekonk. Brian from Seekonk. Thanks for listening, Brian, even though apparently you are not a fan of mine. But this is what Brian in Seekonk says and writes to me. John, I listened to your speech about ending the division between MAGA and rhinos and how we need to come together as Republicans or conservatives. Well, John, F you. Of course, he spelt it out in the email. F you, John Deaton. Don't tell me how to be. You weren't even born here. Go back to Detroit where you were born. MAGA is the only way I will vote. If you don't 100% adopt MAGA and America first and agree with Trump 100% of the time, I won't vote for you. I'd rather vote for Ed Markey. That's what Brian from Seekonk had to say after he heard my speech that I played on one of my last shows that I gave when it talked about unifying, coming together, where I brought up the fact that, Republicans eat each other alive. This division, MAGA versus rhinos, purists versus pragmatists, right? That you're searching for perfect and you're letting good go away. And where you focus on the 20% that you disagree with a candidate and ignore the 80% that you agree with. Why? I gave a speech that, listen, while we argue over who's conservative enough, Democrats keep winning in Massachusetts. And so all I said was, we need to come together, stop that, right? That we believe in predominantly the same things, lower taxes, for example, so that we working families can have more money to take home that they earn. We all believe in that, right? You believe in that, don't you, Brian? Lower taxes? You believe in less government overreach, don't you? So that small businesses can thrive and parents can raise their kids their way. You believe in that, don't you? Because I do. I believe in that. Do you believe in that, Brian from Seacon? I believe in innovation, school choice, and a place where hard work still matters. Do you believe in that, Brian from Seacon? Is that a MAGA platform? Is that a Rhino platform? Or is that just an American platform? That was my speech, basically. And Brian from Seacon, he wants to take issue with it. So let me first address, well, you were born in Detroit. Brian wins the Moron of the Week award. Hard Truth here, the Hard Truth Show, is going to send Brian a plaque that says you are the Moron of the Week. Where you're born doesn't dictate the circumstances of your life. Yes, I was born in the ghetto in Detroit. I was born with a deadbeat father, a single mother on welfare and food stamps. And I chose to not let those circumstances dictate my life. I explained to you, and I wrote in my book, Food Stamp Warrior, how I was raped for a period of 2 years between the ages of 9 and 11. I could have chosen to be a victim all my life. I chose not to be. I chose not to let the circumstances of that childhood dictate my life. And I came to Massachusetts to go to law school to achieve the American dream in Boston at New England School of Law. And guess what? I decided to do something. Brian, have you served? Have you wore a uniform? Because I wore the greatest uniform that's ever existed, United States Marine Corps uniform. And you want to know what else, Brian? I was selected by the Marine Corps to represent the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts for the 1994 Judge Advocate Law contract. One of the greatest honors of my life. I beat out Harvard Law, BC Law, BU Law, Northeastern Law, Western New England School of Law, and Suffolk Law School students to have the honor to represent the Commonwealth for the 1994 Judge Advocate Law contract. So I represented this Commonwealth in the Marine Corps. I was good enough for that, so I think I'm good enough to run for Senate because I got news for you. I got news for you, Brian, from Seaconk. Serving in the Marines, representing Massachusetts, to me is a greater honor than going to Washington and being around career politicians. I'll serve with those Marines and represent the Commonwealth in that way. So if I was good enough for the Marine Corps, I think I'm good enough to run for Senate. All right, so being born here, that's nonsense, dude. It's nonsense. Expand your horizon. Now, you want to know who else would call you a moron, Brian? President Trump. President Trump would call you a moron, because you say, I have to agree with everything. President Trump would take the position, I really don't care if he's not the biggest Trump supporter. I really don't care if he disagrees with me on certain things. I want the seat. We want the Republican to have a seat in Massachusetts because we live in a divided world and Republicans only control the Senate by 3 seats and the House is only controlled by 5 seats. And guess what happens if the Senate flips? Elizabeth Warren becomes the chairwoman of the Banking Committee. President Trump doesn't want that in his last 2 years of his presidency. So he would say, yeah, Deaton is better than Markey, okay? It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. But since you like to talk about, you don't think I'm conservative enough for you, why am I not conservative enough? Is it the abortion issue? Yes, I'm pro-choice. I have 3 daughters. I believe a woman has an absolute right up into a certain period of time before the child is viable outside of her body to have an abortion. You want to know who agrees with me? Brian from Seacon? 82% of voters in Massachusetts. Not 50, not 60, not 70, 82%. When we voted for an audit of the state legislature, it passed by 72%. In Massachusetts, the citizens here, the residents, 82% believe a woman has a right to abortion. It doesn't mean I favor late-term abortions, because I don't, unless it's the life of the mother or the child or the fetus is already dead. Okay, so is that it? Is that the issue? I supported gay marriage, even before the Democrats did. Is that the issue? You disagree with me? Because I don't support biological men competing against women. So again, are you going to focus on those couple issues that maybe you think I'm not conservative enough, and then say that that Ed Markey is better than me? You might as well vote for Ed Markey. I have a zero tolerance for illegal immigration. I went to the border and talked to border security, learned that 12 million illegals came to this country in the 4 years under Biden. I had a zero tolerance. I said, shut it down. Ed Markey wants to give amnesty and citizenship and voting rights to the 12 million illegals that crossed the border in the last 4 years. I don't support that nonsense. He supports biological boys going against biological girls. I don't support that nonsense. Ed Markey wrote with AOC the Green New Deal. All those mandates that you're paying subsidies for solar and wind and all that's causing your electric bill to go through the roof every month in Massachusetts. That's because of policies like Ed Markey. I don't support that. I don't support foreign wars. I don't support any of that. So you're going to choose to focus on the 20 or 30% you disagree with me and ignore the 70 or 80%. Okay? And the other thing I would say to you, Brian from Seacock, is you do realize where you live, right? You realize you live in Massachusetts since you brought up where I was born. You were born here, presumably. Have you paid attention? Did you know that in 2020, Joe Biden got 65.6% of the vote for the president to Trump's 32%? That's a 33% margin difference. It's the highest in the country. It's a liberal landslide. And in 2024, although I predicted that Trump would do better in Massachusetts, I said he's still going to lose by over 20 points. People like you probably suffering from living in an echo chamber like, oh, no, he's going to win. That's nonsense. You live in Massachusetts, dude. And in 2024, Trump did improve. He improved by 8 points, but he still lost by 25 points. Kamala Harris got 61%. Donald Trump got 36%. That is a spanking. That is a liberal landslide. Get out of your echo chamber, dude. Look around. Don't just talk to your friends and your family. You live in one of the most liberal states in America. And by the way, I got 130,000 more votes than Donald Trump. Yet, I wasn't good enough for you, right? So it just shows you, since I outperformed President Trump, that you have to accept where you live. You don't live in Georgia. You don't live in Alabama. You don't live in Mississippi. You don't live in parts of Texas. You don't live in Florida. You don't live in Ohio, man. You don't live in Wyoming, Oklahoma, Nebraska. You live in Massachusetts. All right? We have the most liberal abortion laws here. We have the most restrictive gun laws here. It is ranked every single federal seat and statewide seat is held by a Democrat. All 9 congressional seats, both 2 U.S. senators, all Democrats. That's where you live. And you're going to take the position that I'm not conservative enough. Dude, you're a moron. We'll be back. Don't you dare touch that dial or change the channel because you are locked in to the hard truth with John Deaton. I am John Deaton, and you are listening to iHeart's WRKO. Listen, it's 7 p.m. It's Sunday, and we got a lot to talk about. Remember, you can contact me by emailing me at johnhardtruthshow.com, john@hardtruthshow.com. I will be reading your criticisms, your comments, your concerns, your questions at various times during the episodes, including tonight. I got a special guest tonight. It is Ray Jennings. That is part of the segment where I highlight a small local business owner in Massachusetts who's out there trying to achieve the American dream. So an entrepreneur, someone who is part of the 80% of small businesses that drive our economy. Okay, when it comes to what drives this economy, it is small businesses. So I'm going to take my time. There's no fee for me doing this. I don't accept advertising from small businesses. I'm going to bring on small businesses, small-time entrepreneurs who took that leap of faith to be their own boss, to be their own captain of their own ship, to achieve their own destiny. I want to highlight them. When you listen to them, some of them are going to be pub owners. It could be dry cleaners. It could be, a local coffee shop. I want you to make sure that if you are going to spend some of your money, you spend some of your money with those people, not just the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world. Okay, so welcome back to the show. This is John Deaton, and you're locked into the hard truth. I got a special guest. I said that I was going to highlight small local businessmen or women in the community. I have a friend of mine on the show. His name is Ray. Ray, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, John. Happy to be here.
All right. Now, listen, everybody. I got a little confirmation bias in my fondness for Ray. He was out there pounding the streets, supporting me when I ran for U.S. Senate. He's a patriot, fellow XRP holder. So we got a lot in common. But the goal here is to highlight what you're doing, not what I've done or what I may do in the future, Ray. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who's Ray Jennings, where you live, and what business you have.
Okay, so I'm an attorney. I graduated in 1996. As a matter of fact, I almost went to New England School of Law. I think we would have been classmates if I did that. I went to Massachusetts School of Law and graduated actually in 1995. So started practicing in 96. I have a local law practice. It's kind of hard to describe. Like people always say, what kind of lawyer are you? It's like, well, you kind of go where your cases take you, right? So it's not like I do any one thing. I can tell you what I don't do. I don't do divorces. I don't do criminal law. I don't do bankruptcy, but I know a lot of fine lawyers that do that stuff. So I started as an attorney, doing civil litigation. I did some collection work. I did cases, cases that came along, mostly business disputes, mostly civil litigation, that kind of thing. My father was a lawyer here in Weymouth. He was actually the town moderator for a number of years. He had a very well-established practice. And so, I sort of fell into that, and then he passed in 2000, and his name still carries today as far as I'm concerned. It's just everybody knows the name, my name, Ray Jennings. It's the same as his, and it's taken away from there. So back in 2019, I had been, prior to that, a patron of a place called the Union Brewhouse in Weymouth, and it's like a beer bar, 17 taps, constantly rotating the different beers from around the world. The prior owner was a friend of mine, and I saw it as an opportunity actually to develop the real estate. It had recently been rezoned. So there was a zoning, and I had been doing zoning for other clients in Weymouth and practicing before the boards. I saw this as an opportunity to develop the real estate, and I wound up with the business too. so that's the way it kind of went.
All right. So where are you located? Where is what's it called?
It's the Union Brew House in Weymouth, Massachusetts, 550 Washington Street. If you know Weymouth at all, it's on Route 53. That's Washington Street, and we're right near the BJ's in town. So, yeah.
And how long have you been the owner?
we bought this. We bought this in 2019. In November, I think we closed. And in March, we shut down for COVID, like everyone else. So
Your timing was impeccable, right?
yeah, it's great. So yeah, but we got the development approved. We've had some setbacks just in terms of developing it, interest rates. So if there are any went up, in the Biden administration, the interest rates became the project is approved for 28 residential units and a new 3,200 square foot restaurant for the retail space. And through circumstances which your listeners don't need to know, we're actively marketing the project to people that might be interested in either buying it outright or developing it in partnership.
Now, when you say buying it outright, would that include the pub house?
Yep. So
Okay.
we could package that up. Part of the attraction is the Weymouth created a few years ago an overlay district. So rather than change the underlying zoning, which still exists as B1, they created this commercial corridor overlay district, and it encourages the mixed use of retail with the residential aspect. And so we presented the project to the town. They approved us for the development, and now we're just we're marketing that as either buy it all and have a nice day, write me a check, or in 5 years I've grown accustomed to knowing the customers and obviously the staff and so forth, and so we have a really vibrant sort of operation here, and I'd like to see it continue just for posterity's sake. But if you write me a big enough check.
Yeah, of course. Listen, what's the seating capacity?
So technically we have 70 inside, but we have a nice patio where I'm seated now that probably fit another 100 if you wanted to. A 3,200 square foot restaurant would probably have close to 150. I imagine that would be able to seat in the new facility.
All right. What kind of food, if any?
So I wouldn't call it pub food. It's a step up from that. We get our fish from Boston Swordfish and Tuna delivered twice a week. So we're the place to go on the South Shore. My customers tell me we have the best seafood on the South Shore. So haddock, it's fresh, it's not frozen. We get it. We literally delivered ourselves twice a week. So we'll have steamers at times. We'll have haddock. We don't use cod. It's everything. So the fish sandwiches. We have a bar pizza, a traditional South Shore bar pizza. So I'm sure you're familiar knowing Dave Portnoy, what that is. 10-inch pan pizza that with the laced edges and so forth. And then the burgers are terrific. 108-ounce Angus beef patties. So people love it. So
All
yeah, just comfort food, and we keep it interesting and keep it simple.
All right. What's your hours of operation there?
We're open noon to close. So ever since COVID, close has been like sort of a vague thing, but certainly no sooner than 11. But the culture has changed, John. It's crazy. The culture has changed.
So you decided to go into the pub business. I know that you had real estate to deal with, and you close, and then the next day, practically, the government shuts you down.
Yeah.
Couldn't have been the way you envisioned launching the business, I assume.
It was crazy, but we own the land. There's 1.7 acres here. We own the land. There's a rental property on, residential rental property. So because we weren't leasing, I think we were in a better position than most of the businesses in the area to survive like a setback like that being closed. And we had the outdoor area already set up. So when we reopened, we were already set up. We put up tents out back, and we opened as soon as we could, and then it's been a transition to trying to get back to normal. But I think it really has changed the way people go out and eat and enjoy themselves. They're not out late at night anymore, and the younger people that used to come here and pack the place they don't go out like they used to. And I say that from knowing other business owners in town too. So as a practicing attorney, I advise a lot of those other business owners, and so they have noticed a shift as well. And we just have to deal with it.
Is that? Do you think, Ray? Do you think that is that the DoorDash impact, or would you attribute it to just fundamental behavior change because of the lockdowns?
Yeah, I think people's behavior changed because of the lockdowns. And I think people that would go out 2 or 3 times a week don't go out 2 or 3 times a week. They go out less. It was funny. I just got my POS system set up. Like, there was no POS system, like no like one that was communicating on the internet right before we shut down, like literally days before. And so we weren't in a position to stay open in order to take out. We had no track record or anything like that. So it really hit us. The timing was terrible, but we paid all our employees all the way through COVID, and I'm happy that we came out on the other side. And I can't say it made us stronger, but we're here and we're doing great. So
what lessons do you think? Obviously, the time it was Governor Baker shut down businesses. We ever experienced something like that again? Do you think are there lessons to have been learned? Do you think,
John? I was sitting here on a Sunday night when one of my partners said that they're shutting down the state, and I thought they're shutting it down. They're shutting down all the businesses, and I thought they can't do that. Like, what authority do they have to do that? Like, I couldn't even wrap my mind around it. I was like, well,
you went back to constitutional law in law school, right?
Exactly. I went back to constitutional law, third year of law school. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. That where does the governor get the authority to tell me I can't operate my business? Like, I'm drafting the complaint in my head that I'm going to run into Superior Court. And then, the SJC in Massachusetts sort of just like supported the whole thing. They shut down the court system. And I'm like, well, I've already lost. Like, where am I going to go? Yeah, I think we have some lessons to learn from that whole experience about, I think it taught us some deep lessons about, the Constitution and our rights and our freedoms and privileges and all of that stuff. It's like it's a great textbook example of, like, I think it would come out differently on a law school examination than it did in reality. You know what I mean? I think the right answer is not the way we got it, is what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean?
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Remember, the show is sponsored by my law firm, the Deaton Law Firm. For the last 25 years, I've been a lawyer in Massachusetts, and I've been representing mesothelioma and lung cancer and asbestosis plaintiffs in court against some of the major corporations in the world, some of the largest insurance companies. I've battled with Travelers Insurance. I've battled with Dow Chemical. I've battled with just about every Fortune 100 company that incorporated asbestos into their products. A lot of people are shocked by this, but there was about almost 5,000 different products that asbestos was an ingredient in. It wasn't just the pipe insulation that was on Navy ships or in your basement, or those cast iron boilers that we call them snowman boilers that have all that white asbestos insulation over them. But I've represented, plumbers and pipe fitters and people who removed those boilers or put the pipe covering on. But I've also represented people who never had that kind of field. They were exposed because they used makeup, or they used Johnson & Johnson baby powder that had asbestos contaminated talc in it. I've went up against CoverGirl, Avon. I've represented people at Fall River Shipyard. I've represented people at Fall River Shipyard in Quincy. I've represented people on the Cape at Sandwich Power Plant, at Canal Electric. I've represented people who worked at Boston Edison, GE plant in Pittsfield, farmers in Southampton who were exposed to all the asbestos that's on the brakes and the clutches on tractors. You know, I've went up against John Deere, Caterpillar, heavy equipment manufacturers who used and incorporated asbestos into their products. So I've represented those auto mechanics, those heavy mechanics, heavy machinery mechanics. And so if you've been exposed to asbestos, if you suffer from mesothelioma, lung cancer, asbestosis, you can contact me at the Deaton Law Firm. That's DeatonLawFirm, DeatonLawFirm.com. And you can also reach me here at The Hard Truth at john@hardtruthshow.com. No, I agree with you. You know, on one hand, I want to be somewhat forgiving because, you know, it was a pandemic. You don't know what's going on. But at the same time, there were other decisions, Florida and other examples, where the shutdown certainly wasn't to the extent it was here in Massachusetts. And so I'm hoping that future leaders learn those valuable lessons, because small businesses is 80% of the U.S. economy.
Right.
And go ahead. I know you have something.
It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Like any time in history, like if you look at other pandemics or other outbreaks, you don't quarantine the healthy, you quarantine the sick, right? You don't lock people in their house if there's a virus. You let them out to walk around because the air is fresher outside than it is going to be in your house with who knows what. And it seemed like upside down world to me, and not just from my experience of it, but from a legal perspective. I don't know how people came to the conclusion that they should just sort of hand their rights to, or walk away and just take it, whatever the government says I do, and like there was not a healthy amount of skepticism. I mean, there certainly was on my part. The first thing that I did was tweet out, what the hell? Like, is that a mask or a muzzle? I think I said, and it set off Facebook, social media crazy, because it is. It's like people were afraid to say anything about it. Now let's talk about it. Let's have reasoned discussion. Let's look at the medical evidence. And it was just I was a little bit disappointed with how easy people were to sort of just subjugate themselves to authority, and that's disturbing. That's disturbing.
No, listen, you're preaching to the choir there, brother. I mean, the one book that probably impacted me the most was George Orwell's 1984, right. And obviously Animal Farm and the other things. But Big Brother is only one generation away. Right. Is the way I look at it. And if we're that close, that easily going to just, give the government complete, utter control over our lives and our ability to make a living. A small business person such as yourself, takes that leap of faith, possibly going in debt, whatever, signing contracts, obligating yourself for years to open a business and be part of what drives the economic engine in this country, be your own boss, your own person, all those things, part of that piece of the American dream pie. And then the government tells you, no, sorry, you don't get to do that. We're just going to shut you down. And I agree with you. In this world where, whether we're talking about that or we're talking about vaccines or any of the other issues, almost people don't want to have what you recommend. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the science. Let's have an honest debate about what's the right course of action. They're too quick to just accept whatever the government tells them to do.
And then knowing what we know now about the effectiveness of masks and the effectiveness of, the, preventative equipment or whatever, knowing what we know about viruses now, because we've all learned like how they're transmitted, there's people still walking around with masks. Now, I understand that there's some cultural thing. I was in Japan many years ago, and as a cultural matter, people wear masks. They've done it for generations, and they do it when they're sick. You don't do it to prevent you from getting sick. Who wears the mask in a surgical setting? The doctor wears the mask so he doesn't infect the patient. The patient doesn't wear a mask. just like these basic sort of like observations that were just over everybody else's head. I noticed that during the pandemic. So it was good in that respect, is it woke my mind up to like sort of how easily we can be manipulated and how easily we can fall into sort of that, subjugated role. And I'm disappointed in a lot of ways with people in the way that they reacted to that, because it's in a crisis that, you really sort of, figure out what your character is. And I can't say that I'm not disappointed in, how readily we just dispensed with all of that, like common sense went out the window. And I'd like to see people learn the lesson from that. I think there's some people that never really learned the lesson and never really apologize for the behavior, and they really, I just want them to learn and become more freedom oriented, more individualism in our system is an important value. You know what I mean? It's not socialism. It's individuals.
Unless you're in New York City.
System, yeah.
I don't know if you saw the election in New York City. When you bring up, listen, we live in fascinating times, but listen, we could talk forever. Let me ask you, what's the business called and where is it located again?
Okay, we are the Union Brew House in Weymouth, Massachusetts, 550 Washington Street. It is a pub, classic sort of almost like an Irish pub. It's kind of got the low ceilings, very cozy decor, and we are open 7 days a week at noon and probably 10:30 at night or so. So we'd love to have you. Love to introduce you. By the way, the Gulf of Weymouth T-shirts originated out of here.
Oh yeah, let's. We got a couple more minutes. Tell us about the Gulf of Weymouth.
Phenomenon. The mayor was here, although he denies that he was here, but he was here. And
you're not talking about Bob Headland, are you?
Bob Headland, yeah. It was dry January, and he was here, so he wasn't drinking, and it was all over the news, the Gulf of America. And Bob was here, and he looked at his phone, and then he looked at a map, and then he crossed out Hingham Bay, and wrote in Gulf of Weymouth. So he renamed the Gulf, the Hingham Bay Gulf of Weymouth on his phone. And then my good friend Jason Thayer, who got the idea to make it into a T-shirt. We sold over 1,000 T-shirts so far. We raised. I think we've given close to $8,500 to the Veterans Memorial here in Weymouth, and in particular, it funded a project of Bob's Headland's, which was a memorial dedicated to the Fitzgibbon family, which was a father and son who both died in the Vietnam War. The father was in 1956, I think, part of the conflict, which later became the Vietnam War. And then his son, who was 12 years old when his father died, enlisted and was also killed in Vietnam. And so there is now a dedicated a memorial to the Fitzgibbons for that. And it's a beautiful tribute. We also have 5 Medal of Honor winners in Weymouth, which Bob Headland and through contribution from Peter Hale of Quincy, dedicated a new memorial. Most Medal of Honor recipients in the entire nation in any one town.
Oh, wow.
And it's a beautiful memorial right next to the town hall now, as a result of that. So we turned a silly little T-shirt and a joke into thousands of dollars for veterans and veterans causes, and we're happy